we're back with Kenny G. And Marilynn Hughes. And, sweet, is that? Okay. So, hi Marilynn, we're back.
Hi Brian.
How you doing
I'm back,
today?
and you're back. And
We're
all
back?
back. The
Back to
critters
back.
are back.
Critters are back. So we're going to continue on, and we're going into the mechanics of existence today.
We are.
I wanted to start off with a quote and see if I can read it without my glasses.
My gosh.
Suzuki. This is from Suzuki. In the
Oh.
beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the
Yes.
expert's mind, there are few. I like that. Now, I taught Kundalini Yoga for many years to thousands of students. And so I would always teach beginner classes. I taught a lot of master series, that would go on for a year, like mastering the mind or mastering the 10 yogic bodies or mastering the chakras, mastering pranayama, But I always loved to go back to teaching beginner stuff. I always try to approach things too in that way. Like, I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing, because that way I can really absorb a lot more. If I'm like, oh, well, that goes against what I think about this, because I can absorb it, and then later on I can just shuck it off, or just go like, well, maybe that's true or maybe not. But, because I always have this inner compass sort of that's, kind of guides me towards what I feel is truth, at that time. But I never definitively ever will say yep, that's it. I know it for a fact. Because, I think that the truth is, we can never really ultimately know absolute truth, but we can kind of go in the direction of it and then try to keep searching for what it is, So now I'm going to put on those.
Well, you just opened a can of worms, Brian.
I did? All right. Well, that's what we're doing, is we're opening lots of cans of worms. Right? And maybe that should be the title. Instead of Initiation into the Mysteries, opening a can of worms. You think?
We could do that. We could say opening worms cans.
Opening worms cans. Yeah.
Yeah, opening worms cans.
Worms cans opening. So, universal sphere of realms. Can we touch upon that to start off? Because we're getting into the mechanics of existence.
We sure can, but we need to address what you just talked about first, which is that there's two sides to that of what you just shared, and this goes back to the quote that you also shared, which is, why is that true? In the beginner's mind, why are there many possibilities? And in the master's mind, there are few. The reason for this, and this is something we'll talk about in this chapter, the mechanics of existence, is because as you're moving closer to energetic truth, you are moving closer, ever and ever closer, to God's truth. And when you begin to touch into what the actual energetic truth is, there is objective truth. And there is a way that we can actually discover what the objective truth is in this world, and we can do that energetically, but we can also do that through other means that don't require us to be mystics in order to do so. But we're going to set that aside for now, because we're going to be talking about the mechanics of existence. We're going to talk about how it plays out in energetic terms. So that's what Suzuki is referring to. In a beginner's mind, there are many, many possibilities, because that discernment capacity has not been formed, honed, or fine-tuned as of yet. But in a master's mind, they can observe the same element and know that it's actually limited to few or only one actual truth. Do you see?
Mm-hmm.
And this is what that means. So this is part of the reason why you'll hear, for instance, like a lot of people will actually accuse some of the great souls or the masters of being judgmental or whatever because of this faculty which has been developed in them, which allows for them to actually discern at an energetic level so that they're able to determine what something actually is through the eyes of God. It has been revealed to them, which is very different than being on the ground as a beginner and saying, well, if I'm looking at this through the human eye without the influx from the divine, then it could be all of these different things. Yes, all these things are possible. But the master receives the divine influx and knows what it actually is. And so there's only the few possibilities in the master's mind. And that's what true discernment becomes. And that's why you see, this is why you see also that many times you'll hear, and this is an inferior mode of thinking, where there will be these accusations that are poured out against the idea of discernment, of having the ability to recognize what something is as being quote unquote judgmental, when in fact that's what discernment is. But from the beginner's mind, which oftentimes will be the mind of the majority, that's judgmental. And so they will believe oftentimes that, oh, but that's judgmental to say that. It could also be this or this or this or this. But the master will say, no, but it is this. This is what it actually is. And so the master doesn't waste time on, trying to make everyone feel better. The master focuses on the end point, which is, what is it? Because you cannot actually do anything of value in terms of alteration or discernment or knowing how to proceed until you first determine what something is. And so in what others might view as a charity of saying, well, it could be this, in order to prevent themselves from having to actually undergo a true discernment process and calling it what it is, and actually sometimes making themselves feel superior by not engaging in discernment. Do you see? Mm-hmm. They are actually engaging in the lesser action spiritually, because the spiritual path requires discernment, because we are moving closer and ever closer to the eye of God. And so a master is going to become more and more in touch with the energetic truth which he receives as a natural influx of the Holy Spirit, where it is just revealed to him or her what something is. And what something is, this is really important. Sorry, I'm taking a detour, but it's an important detour. Mm-hmm. A lot of times people will say, but that's how it looks. And it matters how things look. And it's, no, it really doesn't matter how things look. It matters what things are. This is important because people will focus more on how does something look, and they will not look deeper to see what that actually is. And many times they will judge it incorrectly. They will discern it incorrectly. And so they will do so both to the positive and to the negative. They will discern a situation, trying to figure out my camera. Okay, there we go. They will try to discern it based on, well, this looks like this looks like this looks like this. But the reality is, it still is not what you have concluded. So it doesn't matter what things look like. It matters what they are. People will make conclusions based on how things look, and they believe that that matters. But what matters is what things are, and that's what matters to God. But the reason we will do this on earth is because of this attachment that human beings have to how other people may perceive them. When in reality, all that matters is how God sees and what God knows. And if God knows the truth, and if the truth is righteous, when I say righteous, let me clarify what that means in just a second. If the truth is righteous, then it is okay. Now, when I say if the truth is righteous, that doesn't mean that that, you know, because everyone sins, everyone falls short of the grace of God. However, when there is an honesty that we reveal between our hearts and God, when there is an honesty, when there is a genuine movement in the soul, a genuine effort of amendments as the soul is striving, that is a righteous endeavor, despite the fact that there will be mistakes. But going back to that, this is what Suzuki is referring to. And so that's important. So anyway, okay.
Well, that's something that I was going to touch upon a little bit later in this conversation, but since you brought it up, this is kind of like subjective reality versus objective reality. And so,
Yes.
and then there's the eternal truth, because there's so many layers. And so sometimes people may be where it seems like there's truth at one level, but looking at it from a much higher perspective, and then, you know, with the multiplicities that we could take into account, it's like, yeah, but it's not really true, because, you know, from your point of view it might be, but it's not. Because I've heard people use that argument too, where it's like, well, if it's true to them, then it's true. Well, okay, it can be, but that doesn't mean from any other perspective or a higher level that it is.
Well, and see, that's a very good point to bring up, because that can be used as an excuse for all manner of evil. So if it's true to somebody that they need to kill people to do some kind of thing, then it's true for them, right? No, that just means that they are responding to something interiorly that they are justifying within there on some level. It's possible they are being fed something from a darker source and they're not aware of it, and they're that lost. But there are so many different propensities, and this is where energetic truth also comes in, because the energetic truth behind that is going to then come out, that a person who is in this mode actually would be in the dominant darkness or evil category, or in some type of category where they enjoy inflicting harm on others, or they do so out of some type of some type of self-gratification.
Mhm. And that could
You
be
see,
even doing harm energetically by
exactly.
judging someone,
Yes.
because that does affect people.
Right. And this is where people get messed up though, is that there's a big difference between judging and discerning. See, now you can make you don't ever have to make a judgment against another person, because judgment is reserved for God alone. Only God knows the heart of a soul. But discernment requires us to actually evaluate the value of interactions and deeds. But you know where people get messed up is that they oftentimes will focus more on the deeds of others versus their own. This discernment process really starts within, and we focus primarily on discerning our own. And then the more that this energetic truth is given to you, the more compassion is generated within you, because a soul is not entrusted with the energetic truth of other souls' paths unless or until they're in a position where they will not judge it, where they will have genuine compassion for the greater good being done for every soul that is entrusted to their care. So they will not be in a position, they will not be allowed to work in the realms of creation and evolution unless they have reached that pinnacle where judgment in that way is not a part of their thinking. All that they're thinking is compassion. I am going to do what God directs me to do to assist this soul with whatever their fetter, craving, or sin or compunction may be, and see if this will help them. And there is a constant awareness of, but for the grace of God go I. People do not understand how much is packed into that statement. You know, but for the grace of God go I applies to everything in this world, because the reality is that we have all been pulled out from lower realities and moved forward by other souls who have very humbly and kindly and compassionately given and continue to. Because if it were not for the kindness and compassion of the spiritual teachers and the guardian angels and all these beings that bring themselves to us, who are of their own nature residing on much higher realms than we do, but they choose to come down and pull us up. And so thus we must do the same. We give back to creation that which creation gives to us. And this is the exact meaning of, but for the grace of God go I. We remember, if it weren't for the very self-same actions of other souls who have done this for me, I would not even be in a position to be doing this for them, because I would still be there. You know, and this is the ever constant struggle of evolution of how the souls move from the lower to the higher. So you had made another statement at the beginning. Can you remind me of what that was that I wanted to address? It was important.
Well, in the opening statement, we talked about Suzuki,
We got
and beginner's
Suzuki.
mind. And so I would always, as a teacher, want to teach to that place with people of beginner's mind. And then I jumped into a universal sphere of realms, and you said, "Well, let's address
Yeah.
what was just talked about."
Okay. Yeah, there was something in there.
Well,
That was the second point that you made.
well, it'll come up. But as you just were talking about just now, what it reminds me of is what we're going to be talking about later on,
Right.
when we're finishing up the Hammer of Mysticism. And it's going to get into the nature of reality and quantum entanglement. And so if we looked at your, as an analogy, the helpers from other realms that helped you, if they were like a lot of us on earth, as we're going through this is a school in and of itself here on earth, but if they were coming from a judgmental place with issues, and they were plastering that on, they looked at you and they're like, oh, she's got hair like Kenny G, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna help her.
Which they probably do amongst themselves, and they're I
no,
would
you
be
have beautiful
laughing
hair.
along with them.
I'm teasing. But because we're talking about our ability as an initiate to discern reality, objective or subjective, but also just allowing, without any kind of, just allowing beings to be, allowing people to be however they are, and not put our own stuff on it.
Right.
That's what is. It's not like that's what is according to what I think about, and plus, I spilled coffee on my pants or whatever, it's just, everything is as it is. If we take ourselves out of it, there's a certain truth that is there.
Well, yes, and what you're saying here, this is reminding me of what I wanted to address, which is great, which was, how you were saying, people have, well, if they think it's true, then it must be true. But how, but then you have all these levels of truth. And the reality is that is not actually true. What we talked about how when you go through the initiations, you go into these windows of perception. Now, the purpose of the windows of perception is not to embrace these ways of seeing as being actually necessarily true in terms of the truth of God. This is really important. It's so that we become more understanding of why different people may believe or view certain realities differently than we do, or even why they may see it not through the eyes of truth, but through the eyes of various illusions that they accept as incomplete truth, or and sometimes variations on truth. And so, and of course, this can also apply because we all have different faith paths. And so people will view their realities through different practices and faiths, which is also important. But what we want to understand is that going through the windows of the perceptions is for us to become more understanding. It's for us to understand why a person sees something in this way. It doesn't denote that this way that they see things is a truth of God. It denotes that we now understand how in their mind this makes sense. And we can understand it. We have compassion about it. It's like, okay, well, looking through this process, the thought process they went through, I understand how this conclusion arose in them. This is the conclusion they came to. It makes sense from these thought processes that they went through. It doesn't automatically, now there can be cases where it is true, but it doesn't automatically mean that this window of perception is a truth of God. Windows of perception are to help us to understand our fellow men. Energetic truth is to help us to understand God. And so God's truth is the truth by which all other truths are subordinated. So everything, whether it's our window of perception or anyone else's, is going to be put under the microscope and the magnifying glass of the energetic truth, the true eternal law, which is going to come down through the Holy Spirit and is going to transform and change us so that we will actually learn discernment. And so what we have to understand then, so when you were talking about how everyone has their own truth, yes, they do. But that does not mean that everyone's truth is actually true. In fact, the fact that everyone has all these truths indicates that most of them are not. You see? But the goal of this spiritual journey, and then especially as we're going into and through the initiations, is that we are now holding ourselves to a much higher standard. We want to now be bringing ourselves closer. And we will continue to do this throughout our spiritual journey, throughout our life, where we are lifting ourselves closer and closer to God's truth, which is objective and which is a clearly delineated spiritual body of knowledge. But let me explain what I mean when I say that, because it is a moving body, it is a spirit, it is a Holy Spirit, which means that energetic truth is not like dogmatic or moral theology, even though dogmatic and moral theology definitely serve a purpose and a function on the ground here. But the law of God is a moving, living body. And the reason for this is because the underlying intentions, circumstances, and all of these factors that determine what's happening in regards to every human interaction are relevant as to what the truth actually is according through the eyes of God. It's not just a clear dogmatic judgment or a clear moral judgment all the time. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is not. And that's why we require this knowledge and why Suzuki refers to this. Because in order for us to properly discern, we have to literally go through all of these initiations where we become capable of receiving that influx from the Holy Spirit, which instructs us as to the energetic truth, so that we understand what is actually going on in front of us. Let's just take a random situation. You could have a situation where, and any situation I create is going to be controversial. So I'm going to throw my disclaimer out ahead of time that there is no way you can throw a situation out with a moral discernment attached to it that is not going to be controversial. You can throw out any type of situation like this and it will be controversial. But let's just say I'm going to throw a few out. I'm going to throw a few out that I actually had to deal with just because I'm going to make it a little fun. Okay, so you would think if you're helping a soul who, let's say, one would think, if you're helping a soul who died in an electric chair, right? You would think that that might be pretty cut and dry, maybe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but the energetic truth may be that they were guilty. It may be that they didn't do it. And this person is literally now a martyr, a victim themselves. It could be that It could even be something in between. Maybe they were there, but they were not the perpetrator, and the real perpetrator got off scot-free, and they were the scapegoat. So the energetic truth could be any number of these. So you could have a situation where you're meeting the soul of someone who just died in an electric chair, and you're just assuming, well, they must have been guilty, so I guess I'm taking them down below. And you could be totally wrong, because they may have been an innocent victim themselves. Maybe they had nothing to do with it and they were wrongfully convicted. And I've had that kind of situation more than once. And so that's why energetic truth is important. There are many things in this world that are never uncovered. There are many things, whether it's lies, slander, deceit. How many people leave this world where things, lies and gossip and slander that changed their lives dramatically was never cleared up, and the entire life was completely altered? Their entire karmic configuration and the karmic configuration of everyone who listened to it and believed it and treated them differently as a result will change from this life to the next life as to what now has to occur next. These are all parts of the energetic truth. Well, what if you believed that this woman was having a spurious affair with some other man, and that's why she left husband A and she wasn't, and her whole family was destroyed, and then this woman's life was ruined, and the whole rest of the life continues, and now you guys have to all repair this. You know, the children that came from that marriage were completely inexorably destroyed. What about a situation where, let's say you have, I'm going to give you a culmination that is another thing that you can see very often happening, where people make agreements before this life that they don't fulfill. So let's say there was a grouping of 3 or 4 souls that were going to incarnate together. They were going to be born in different homes. They were going to end up as children who needed to be adopted. And one of those parties was going to bring them all together, and they were all together going to follow a certain path, and this would lead to their destiny. And we spoke about destiny being God's will for the soul versus fates being, you know, more of the personal outcomes. And what if that one person who had agreed to bring those souls together once incarnated, just, I don't want to do that. The entire thing is thrown off, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so now you have all 4 of these souls are on completely different paths. So the energetic truth is inexorably altered on all 4 of those souls by the actions that are completely unrelated to any of these other 3. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Is this making sense?
Oh, yeah.
Sort of? Okay. And let's also go to.
Well, before you go there, it's in regards to like the programs that were set up for those people. So when mm-hmm. things get adjusted, you know, here on the ground, then wouldn't they inexorably just go towards other programs then? And maybe still go towards that same, you know, what was
they end up, depending on how far astray they go, they do reconfigure. And so we reconfigure these new paths. These new paths have to come out and be reformed. And depending on how far off you are, sometimes things can be brought close, but like in a situation like that, it would be completely different. It would have to reconfigure completely different paths for all of these souls. And so, you know, it's kind of like a computer that's constantly building new programs, you know.
Because it
when,
reminds me, well, it's parallel realities, right?
yes,
Because
it
we can
is.
look at that from our whole life, and that
Right.
could feed us all these, you know, realities that it could have gone.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and then with the program and with you know, eternal truth and you know, eternal, you know, reality, um, it's like it exists.
Yes.
It exists, like this real eternal truth, whether we know it or not. But we as initiates can have the intention of with help, hopefully being guided to be connected to that truth, eternal truth, whatever it is, to go in that
Right.
direction. And I think so. For me, I'm lucky because I just really believe that I don't know anything, and I continue to study and I pray and I discern and I keep learning. And so I think that I probably am closer to the truth, but I never will be someone who just thinks that I know what truth is. But I do know that truth does exist.
Well, and see, this is where we can get a little confused about what we're talking about when we're talking about eternal truth, because we're not talking about just like you must follow a certain faith or you must follow a certain belief system. We're talking about eternal truth as what is really happening in every given scenario that we see going on around us.